Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. Today's video is my reading wrap-up from the month of November. November was National Novel Writing Month, which means I was spending a lot of my free time writing. However, due to the power of audiobooks and also the Thanksgiving holidays, I was still able to enjoy quite a number of books. We'll talk about the first two books together because they're books 2 and 3 in the Expeditionary Force, Spec Ops and Paradise. This is a fun space opera that follows the main character, Joe Bishop, low-ranking soldier on Earth. When we have first contact with aliens, he thwarts an alien attempt to take over his small town, and then he winds up joining the Expeditionary Force, which is the force from humanity that is going up to help their new alien allies in this much bigger war against their enemies. And things are not how anyone expects. Joe ends up getting field promotions and becoming a colonel in the Expeditionary Force, which he never expected, and the adventure continues. So I don't really want to talk about the exact events of books 2 and 3 in the series because it will majorly spoil what happened before, but I did really enjoy them. We are increasing the cast of characters that we are becoming attached to and also learning more about the other aliens and civilizations in the galaxy. What I really like about the series so far is you feel that there is a lot more going on in a much larger scope to the world building and the civilizations pulling everyone's strings. But so far in the stories, we are only directly exposed to a small percentage of that, so you can really get a grip on what's going on. This is a long series. I think the final book just came out this month in book 14 or 15, so I know the world's going to get much larger. And another thing about these books is they're just funny. It's just a fun break from heavier, more serious books. Next, I read The Luminaries by Susan Dennard, which is a young adult fantasy. It's about this girl, Winnie, whose family is exiled from this community of people who are luminaries. They are sort of like a secret society. They live in this isolated sort of village and they guard this very specific forest because nightmares and monsters spring up every night, and then the luminaries have to defeat them so they don't spread into the real world. There are a handful of these different types of forests throughout the world, so there's different luminary societies. Because the luminaries there believe that Winnie's father was a traitor, her family has been exiled. She's secretly going to try to do the 3 trials that, if she survives them, will allow her to become a luminary and end her family's exile. When she wrote it, it started out as this choose your adventure thing on Twitter, and then it turned into this novel. So I think that concept is really cool. Next, I read another T. Kingfisher. If you've been watching my more recent videos, you know that I have just fallen for T. Kingfisher this year. And I learned that in the world of the White Rat, which the duology of the Clockwork Boys and the trilogy The Saint of Steel are in, there is a standalone book in that world set right in the middle called Swordheart, which is what I read. It is about a woman who has just inherited everything from her late husband's late uncle, and those family members are doing what they can to try to control her to get their hands on that inheritance. One of these things that she has inherited is the sword, and when she accidentally draws it, it turns out that there is a man whose soul has been bound to that sword. They set out to legally free her from the clutches of this very selfish, greedy family, and adventure and romance ensues. It has T. Kingfisher's typical dry, dark kind of humor. It has a lot of very practical characters who wind up in these extremely strange situations. It has a little dash of horror in it because that's just what she does with her world building, and it also has some romance in it. It's definitely what I would consider cozy fantasy, which is something that I've really gotten into these last few months. Speaking of cozy fantasy, I finally picked up Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Again, another somewhat fast read. This is a story that feels sort of like a D&D campaign, but not the campaign itself, but what happens afterwards. The main character is this orc mercenary who doesn't want to be a mercenary anymore, and she takes all of her savings and she opens up a coffee shop in this little town where no one's even heard of coffee before. Follows her and the new friends that she makes as she opens up the shop and has to tangle with some local trouble. If you want something that is not grimdark, honestly the opposite end of the spectrum, but still fantasy, magic, legends and lattes. Then I read The Stars Undying by Emery Robin, which I talked about in depth in my recent video where I discussed the e-arcs that I've recently finished. The Stars Undying is a space opera retelling of what happened between Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, and Mark Antony. So if that concept intrigues you, you should really pick this novel up. How that story inspiration was woven into the politics and world building in this novel was very well done. If you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts, check out that video. I will link it so you have easy access to it. I really enjoyed this one. It is the first in a series, but you can read this one and enjoy it on its own. It has a very satisfying conclusion. It's very unique. The world building is cool. The characterizations are done very well. There's a lot of politics. So if you like somewhat of a politic-heavy space opera with interesting world building, check out The Stars Undying. Then, kind of on a whim, I picked up the Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, probably because I had seen that the third and final book in the series has recently released. This is simply the story of a 17-year-old girl who has grown up somewhat in poverty, has been struggling, and then she goes to school one day and it turns out that some billionaire has left her something in his will, and the family has been trying to locate her so that they can do the will's reading. She travels to this mansion where this billionaire lived. He had left her almost everything and his actual family almost nothing, but in order for her to inherit, she has to live on his mansion for 1 year. Basically, she has to survive living there for a year because a lot of stuff starts to happen because there's a lot of money at risk. But that's not really the most fun part about this book. It's that the billionaire that died was really into games, and as his 4 grandsons, who are about her age now, were growing up, he just trained them to solve puzzles, and everything is a game to them. And so the fact that she was named the heir and not them, to them that is one giant puzzle they need to solve. So the 4 sons and the main character start trying to figure out why did he name her as the heir, what is really going on, and it starts unraveling this greater and greater puzzle. And really that sort of puzzle aspect of the story is really what made it a page turner. I've already actually finished the second one, and I'm going to be starting the third one in the series pretty soon because I just really want to know what happens. Last, I picked up an urban fantasy romance that I saw recommended by Reagan at the Peruse Project, which is a little bit outside my wheelhouse, but I do like fantasy romance and I do like urban fantasy on occasion. It's not the subgenre I pick up the most, but she was speaking about how the character and the magical development over longer series like this can be very satisfying and very well done. And I found that to be the case in this novel, Burn for Me by Alona Andrews. It's following this woman who is a private investigator. She is running the family firm, and she gets pulled into this extremely dangerous case to find and bring into his family this person who has committed an arson. But the thing about this person is he's like the highest tier level powerful in the type of mage that he is, which is a pyrokinetic mage. She's pretty sure that this job is going to get her killed, but if she doesn't do it, her family will lose their business, their livelihood, and their home. This powerful pyrokinetic mage had an accomplice, and the family of that accomplice wants him to not get basically sacrificed in all of this. They call in a favor another very powerful mage to help get their family member out of it. And so this other mage and our main character first clash, and then they have to work together to find these two people. One thing I really liked about this story is that it is set in Houston, which is nearby where I live. So I'm familiar with a lot of the names and the places that they're talking about. And I liked how these powerful dynastic mage houses are really kind of pulling the strings. So it's not just a story about these magical houses getting into trouble, but it actually has real world impacts on the non-magical citizens of Houston. Interested in how that angle is going to be explored also. I think this is going to be a slow burn as far as the romance goes, but that's okay. I like a slow burn romance sometimes. I found the main character very practical. She had a dry sense of humor. She was very determined. I just really liked her mindset. I just really liked the main character a lot, and I'm eager to keep reading in the series. That's all I'm going to talk about for now. Please let me know what were your favorite books that you read in November. Were you able to get a little bit extra reading done because of the holidays? And for anyone else who has sort of been introduced to the concept of cozy fantasy or maybe fallen in love with some of those books, I want to point you towards a subreddit that I learned about this month called R Cozy Fantasy. They have tons and tons of recommendations on there, and I definitely have been adding books to my TBR. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to support your local library. Thanks.